Hello, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hello, everybody.
And we're with The Road to Retail. On our podcast, Tracy and I hope to offer tips, insights, ideas, and examples for how small, emerging, and challenger CPG, consumer packaged goods, brands can build their business. Everything from determining if you're ready to grow, where to start, how to prove it online, how to go about securing distribution at a national retailer, driving your business with the end consumer, and how to go about finding an investor if that's important to you. The bottom line is, we would love to help you be successful by highlighting the many important factors that go into establishing and growing your brand.
Bruce and I have been working in CPG commercial operations for over 30 years, working on brands of all sizes. By commercial operations, we mean sales, marketing, trade marketing, new product development, broker and distributor management, new product development, brand M&A, and financing. As a part of our show, we bring our guests that are brand founders and leaders, agencies, Amazon specialists, sales agents, contract manufacturers, retailers, and investors to discuss their experiences and share their insights with the audience.
To keep up with the show, please subscribe to the Road to Retail podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Leave us a review and consider sharing the show with a friend or colleague that may benefit from the content. You can also check out our website to learn more at www.road2retail.com and follow The Road to Retail on LinkedIn. We would love to have you along for the ride.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the most recent episode of Road to Retail, where we talk about exciting topics related to small and emerging and challenger brands. So, Bruce, we have an exciting episode today. So tell our audience a little bit about our travels this week.
Yeah, we have a lot going on this week, Tracy. So first off, who would have ever thought that it's cold in Chicago in February? But
Yes.
For the record, it was, and it probably still is. And before we jump into today's episode, a little Road to Retail news. We'd like to welcome another new sponsor to the show, Retail and Response, and we'll talk about them a little more specifically at the end. But welcome aboard, folks, and thanks for your support. So this week, we went to the ECRM Innovate X Winning in Grocery session. And this was an ECRM event, and this particular part was sponsored by Market Performance Group. Some people might know them as MPG. And this was all a component of ECRM's Center Store Grocery Week program. An absolutely outstanding show and great venue for many small and emerging brands to get out there and, start building awareness and meeting suppliers and meeting retailers. But a very well done, and we're very grateful to have attended this. So this meeting took place last week. I'm trying to think about so it was on the 18th in Chicago, and most of the discussion points were led by MPG personnel, and Tracy and I will recap that. But what we wanted to do was tell the listeners a little bit about this session and each of the topics, because there are 4 or 5 of the topics, and they're all incredibly salient to small and emerging brands. So Tracy, why don't you kick us off with the first topic that was covered at this event?
Absolutely. So the first topic was delivered by Oliver Bogner. So he's the head of social commerce and digital strategy at MPG. And he talked about unleashing the power of social commerce and driving omni-channel growth with TikTok. This was just a fascinating topic delivered and presented by Oliver. And I think our small emerging brands are really going to get a lot out of this. This was, I think, shocking to both Bruce and I, some of the stats. So I'll share a couple of those with you. And that is TikTok Shop did $20 billion in sales in 2024. That's billion with a B. So that is a lot of sales. So social commerce, remember, keep that in your mind. Also, we learned that 180 million Americans, this is kind of alarming actually, spend 54 minutes a day on TikTok. So TikTok is a huge emerging platform to get your brand awareness out there and to sell product. And then also he talked about what TikTok is, and he said TikTok, he described it as Costco meets TJ Maxx meets Amazon. Just fascinating how that blends between brick and mortar and e-commerce. Again, just a fascinating point. And so I guess our message today on this topic for small emerging brands is definitely take a look at and understand and try to engage your brand with that TikTok platform.
Yep. So a little bit to add there, it was quite clear that brands are going to have little choice but to understand and engage not only with TikTok if they want to maximize growth, but understand this whole emerging social commerce. I mean, the amount of sales now being triggered straight off of Facebook ads, Instagram ads, and now TikTok. And to add to Tracy's point, I believe Oliver said that the year before, so 2023, TikTok shops hadn't even cracked 1 billion in sales. So they went from under 1 billion to 20. So
Crazy.
pretty strong growth. And another reason to consider this is brands are going to have to be present where consumers are and when they're ready to buy. So, TikTok's come a long way since Tracy and I were doing dance videos. It's now a good way to drive your business. Trace, anything else to add there before we move on?
No, I just say and just encourage our team, our listeners today to really check that out and see if that's a platform that makes sense, for your brand, because it is definitely an emerging opportunity for brands.
Yeah, and one other thing, Oliver Bogner and then the MPG person who sort of oversaw this whole session of the show, a guy named Todd Matherly, they were very open that if people had ideas or questions to contact them directly. And knowing both of those guys, good guys, they'd be glad to hear from you. I'm quite sure of that.
Yep.
So the next topic that was covered was from aisle to Amazon, amplifying your success on the world's largest marketplace. And the speaker was Bryson Buck, Senior Account Director of E-commerce at MPG. So we've all seen all the stats, and literally this is a hockey stick of growth on Amazon, almost regardless of what the category was. But we're talking about grocery here. So, food items and anything else that you would see in a grocery store. So his comments were, first off, it was obvious, content is king. I know that Michael Eisner, the CEO of Disney, said that way back, and probably someone said it before then. But his points were clear. Develop a clear brand strategy because search drives visibility. So whether it's in your online environment, say your product detail pages on Amazon, etc., even though it can get tedious, word choice matters, your images matter, your videos matter. So take that time. This will all drive a strong customer experience. And again, content drives conversion. If people don't understand your product or don't like it, they're not going to even consider buying it. Strategic product offerings, you need to stand out on the retail shelf. One of the things that Bryson pointed out, and Tracy and I have seen with other brands and used ourselves, is one way to avoid pricing conflict across channels and retail customers is to utilize different UPC codes in the e-commerce environment, right? Because what you want to try to do is avoid head-to-head UPC price comparisons, Walmart to Target to Amazon to your own DTC website if you have one. But if you change up and do a combo pack or do a slightly different count that's only available in the e-commerce world, that'll save you some heartache. And then competitive pricing and promotion. Amazon, like our friends in Bentonville, Walmart, they're obsessed with being the low-cost leader. This gets back again to consider using different UPC prices because you do not want Amazon or Walmart always challenging you as to why the other one has a better price, because the only person that will lose there is you. Okay? You will lose that discussion. So figure that one out. Another thing that Bryson pointed out, which was pretty alarming to me, is currently Amazon may be taking between 35 and 42% of a brand's gross margin in their Amazon fees. So you really have to understand what you're paying for, what you're going to be charged, and try to negotiate hard. And this also comes back to the age-old problem, is 1P better or 3P selling? And a lot of it depends on your, the stage you're in your brand's growth, how knowledgeable you are about working within the Amazon platform, and frankly, how much time or talent you have to put against really managing this. If you're a very small 1, 2, 3 person operation, you probably can't dedicate someone to worry about that all the time. But if you're a little bit bigger, or if you're an Amazon only company, you better figure that out. Tracy, anything to add here?
Yeah, what was fascinating in this discussion was also the number of brands that Amazon has moved from 1P to 3P. He talked about if you're doing under $10 million on Amazon and you were a 1P brand, they're saying thanks but no thanks and moving you to a 3PL. So I thought that was a fascinating point.
True,
But
true.
I think the big thing, the takeaway from what Bruce said is make sure you understand your cost of goods and the cost of doing business at Amazon, because it used to be in the old days a great way to sell product in an inexpensive way, and it's not that way anymore.
Not at all.
Yeah. So let's talk about the next topic. So this was given by Casey Gatson. So Casey is the executive leader of local and emerging brands at Whole Foods. So Casey talked about some very key points. So what Casey's in charge of is the Forager program. There's 10 foragers across the country, and what they're looking for are, innovative new brands. Their program is called Taste of Place. So this is geared towards regional products, regional tastes, things like that. I want to point out this is different than your local program. So this is a totally different thing. These foragers around the country are looking for brands that meet the needs and tastes of that region. Let's say you have a brand that's, geared towards the Southeast or Texas, where you may have a Texas-based barbecue sauce. Those are the types of things that she's looking for. So what are they looking for? They're obviously looking for brands that you've got to be ready for retail. Bruce and I talk about this a lot in other episodes. Make sure you have your UPCs, your case UPCs. You know what your case configuration is. You've got to have all that locked down before you approach a retailer like Whole Foods. Also, she talked about the story. Does the brand have a good story that resonates with the consumer? Such a key point here. Differentiation and having a great brand story. She also talked about that you understand your brand's performance. A lot of brands come to them through the Forager program that have been selling at local farmers market or local small retailers. So make sure you're able to communicate, what you've been able to do so far, and provide proof that your brand can sell. That's another thing. So proof of concept, as Bruce and I've talked about in a couple of different episodes. Key things that she talked about, mistakes that brands make. One is not understanding the Whole Foods process. This is a retailer that uses and depends on their portal for submissions. So if you can't get into the portal and give them all the information that they need and require, you're going to struggle. You also need to understand what their policies and procedures are as far as sustainability, ingredients. I encourage you to go on the website so that you can understand exactly what their parameters are for new and emerging brands. Bruce?
Hey, Tracy, take 1 second and just explain to the folks who may not know what a portal is.
Okay, so it is a website where you click on. So a lot of major retailers have them. Sometimes they're called supplier portals, and it's where you can get all of the information about category review, who's the buyer, all of their new item forms, everything you need to do business with them. That retailer and specifically is on that portal.
Great, great. Thank you. So
Yeah.
Casey talked about a couple of other things. So she gave some tips around the best pitch techniques. So back to the portal, she said, hey, make sure you understand that even though you're submitting this information into a portal, at some point there's going to be a human on the other end of these submissions, and make sure you write your submission accordingly. Like don't write it as if it's just, a binary evaluation to make sure all the different boxes are checked and lines are filled in. Write it, and again, as Tracy said, tell your story. Where you have those opportunities, tell your story and differentiate yourself. She also stressed, and Tracy just hit on this a bit, make sure you understand Whole Foods goals, policies, and objectives. And where truthfully you can tie to those, do it.
Yes.
Do it. And if you know that they're trying to really cut down on the amount of, plastic that they're putting into the recycle system of the country, anything you can do to point out that you're using 50% less plastic than last year, et cetera. Again, try to sell in a way that's helpful to you, right? And then you can make submissions for the program to grocerycentral.amazon.com. So you can go check that out. And that might be a way to get the ball rolling with getting your product considered. One other thing, the foragers are also very helpful to coach you on how to win, because they don't want to bring you in and see you succeed, right? That's a lot of work for them. So they're going to coach you. But one of the key things they pointed out is they're going to coach you in such a manner that they will assume that you win. What does that mean? So if you're in like a 10-store test, they're going to work with you to make sure like your pricing is correct if you get expanded, because you will have to go through a distributor in almost all cases. And the distributor will have costs, and those costs will do one of two things. It will affect your price at the retail shelf, or you will make a lot less money than you were hoping to. So they can be very helpful there. The next point she really stressed and drove home was getting on the shelf is just the beginning. Tracy and I, when we interviewed buyers at 12 of the largest retailers in the country, several of them said, geez, I see brands like literally high-fiving in the conference room when we approve them. And I tell them at that time, guys, the work is just starting. Okay. So plan far out for success. If you have a seasonal product, know when and how you should promote. Understand which marketing tools to use and why. Have good data so you understand how your business is performing. And Casey really stressed that point. I mean, I know when we're all starting out with something new, money's precious, and it's like, geez, I don't want to spend my money buying any data. Well, how do you answer the question of how are things going? Here's the answer you can't give. I don't know. So you need to have good data. The other thing that she really drove home was if your product is a food, a beverage, or something that lends itself towards sampling and demos historically are the best way to get the needle moving at Whole Foods and other accounts. I mean, Costco comes to mind. They can be very expensive programs, but they're also very effective because you can tell people that your energy bar tastes great all day long. But if you put one in their mouth and it tastes great, you've crossed a huge chasm. Tracy?
Yeah, so one of the other things that Casey talked about that is the timeline. So one thing I really want to emphasize is even though this is a forager program, they do go through and follow the category review schedule for Whole Foods, which, by the way, is on the portal that Bruce provided that address. It'll tell you when the review starts. It'll tell you when the meetings are, if you can get a meeting, and then when the decision. So typically, Casey said it's about 12 weeks before they make a decision. So this is a long process, guys. But if you miss that category review, you're going to wait until next year. So 12 weeks to make a decision, and then 8 to 10 months before the product is actually on the shelf. So just understand that this is, again, a long process, but it also gives you time to prepare with your contract manufacturer, because we're talking 500 stores here. So this is, a pretty big order that you will receive. Typically, they're going to ask for a free fill, so one case free for the shelf, and then one case as backup inventory. So just for forecasting purposes, know that. But again, long process, following the category review schedule, and don't think you're going to get, once you submit, you're going to get an answer in a couple of weeks. It does take
Right. And just to drive home Tracy's point, whether it's Whole Foods or Publix or fill in the blank, almost all retailers have very rigid schedules for each category. And we've had clients and brands that we've helped and brands that we've worked on. If you miss those dates, you're going to have to wait because they don't care that Bruce and Tracy are ready now. They needed to be ready 2 months ago. So keep all of that in mind. So the next topic was super interesting. It was called Unlock Growth, Strategic Capital Access and Scaling Insights for CPG Brands in a Competitive Landscape. And the speaker was Mollye Santulli, Senior Associate of Springdale Ventures. So Mollye's firm is an early stage investor in CPG brands, and she gave a really interesting talk. So the first thing she covered was, hey, at Springdale, what do we look for in an emerging brand before we would consider investing? And she ran through a couple of points. She said, first and foremost, and no surprise, belief in the founder. Are they credible, experienced, disciplined? Can we count on them? Do they like return phone calls? Are there typos on the stuff that they send into us? I mean, just stuff to show that you're tight. Then she talked about the financial metrics that they find favorable. She talked about contribution margin. She talked about gross margin, and a term that has been used a lot. The Elliott Began episode that we did, unit level economics, right? And Andy Whitman with Loft Growth Partners, same thing, unit level economics. Does your product have good math behind it? Do you have path to profitability with each channel that you're in? Okay. The days of we'll get there one day are over. They are over. They also want to see a fully loaded P&L. No carve outs. If money is being used for something, it needs to be reflected in the P&L. These are all smart people. They're not going to fall for any hocus pocus. So just get out there and fully load that P&L. Slotting, expenses for your web designer, everything. Put it all in there. And then they like to see 2 sets of revenue growth. What's your revenue growth for the trailing 12 months? And then they also would like to see a path laid out going forward. I mean, they like to see a path of brands heading toward that $50 million in top line sales. And we've heard that number from other investors as well. So that's pretty solid. The next topic she's touched on was how to build resilience into your brand. So this means, how do you react to adversity? How do you plan for the things could be coming? And she gave a couple of examples. She said, if you're thinking of raising money, the timing of your fundraising is key. Do it when you have time. Don't do it when you're in a jam or you suddenly need a lot of money fast for, say, a big order. There's other ways to go out there and find that kind of money. She said, cash flow modeling is key. You need to understand when you will need funding and when you will have big cash outlays. So let's say you pick up a Walmart or a Whole Foods or a Target. You're going to have a big hit to build that inventory. So you can model that out because, as Tracy just said, each of these retailers has a calendar. So if you are accepted, you'll then get told when your order is due in the distribution centers, and you can back into that with your lead times with your contract manufacturer. Okay. Not hard, but it's very specific. I don't want to say tedious because it's important. You just have to be organized. Then she talks about, don't get overextended at retail. Many brands, whether you're huge or small, if you're still testing out a new product or a line extension off an existing brand, don't go to too many retailers too fast and don't go to too many stores too fast. Tracy always likes to use the word small ball, and I totally agree. If you go into a retailer and they can say, hey, let's do a 25 store test, while you may want to do 1,800 stores, it could be the end of your company if it doesn't work. Okay. So take that small test, work it hard, make it work, and then expand from there. It's much, much better to have a conversation of how do we go from 25 stores to 500 than where do I send this stuff that didn't sell in my 1,800 stores. Markdowns and returns are two of the saddest words in our business. And then lastly, before I kick it back to Tracy, is when you go to do fundraising, she said you really have to make sure you select the right partners. Alignment. Are you aligned on the strategy? Are you aligned on your timing for an exit? Do you understand the frequency they will expect to talk to you? When you have a formal session, what kind of a presentation will you have to put together? Because these folks are not going to give you money and just say, hey, Tracy, call me when you can and let me know how it's going. Sometimes you'll get a call every day with either an idea or a question. And, you just have to be really, really careful. And the other thing she said, Tracy, I think I'll hit this here because we're heading on it. She said what really gets their attention first is too high a burn rate on the cash you have. So if the money going out is far exceeding what you've modeled or the revenue coming in, that's a red flag, and there's probably going to be a discussion there. Tracy?
Yep. So the next thing that Mollye talked about was the pitfalls of fundraising. And as Bruce touched on a little bit, you need to find the right partner. So getting a financial partner is kind of like a marriage. You better make sure that you guys are aligned and you understand expectations, as Bruce said. A key point she said is build relationships early. So even if you don't need money right now, you need to be connecting with financial folks, whether that be a PE firm or whatever it is, early, not when you're in a jam, as Bruce said. And make sure that you're aligned also on timelines and the strategy. That's really a key point there. And then find an investor that brings more than just money. You can get an investor that just will write you a check, but you really want a value-added investor that can introduce you to retailers or contract manufacturers or marketing people. Those are a value-added investor, and that's what we really recommend that you go after versus somebody that's just going to write you a check. And then the last thing she talked about was, don't dilute yourself too much and too early. Explore all of your funding options before you choose one. Make sure you really understand what you're getting into and the ramifications of that. Bruce, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, we talked about cash burn. And then the other thing that she put out there, she said most strategic. So that's a company. So if you sell a food product, a strategic would be Nestle versus another private equity group. She said that most strategics in food and beverage are looking for brands doing or well on their way to a path toward $100 million in sales. So keep those numbers in mind. So to get investors would like to see you on a run rate that you're growing and heading toward 50 million. And if you want to exit to a big guy, you need to be running toward that $100 million number. So those are some other things that are helpful. Next topic, Tracy.
Absolutely. So we heard from Heather Grantham. Her topic was data analytics and storytelling for the modern merchant mindset. And Heather is the VP of Insights, Marketplace Intelligence at MPG. She did a great job. This was really a fascinating topic. And she talks about presentations to retailers. And these are so key here. So if you're taking notes and listening to this episode, definitely do so. Know what your objective is going into the meeting. Bruce and I talk about a lot of times where the retailers that we interviewed said, we got to the end and I didn't know what they wanted. Did they want to test? Did they want to be in all stores? Didn't really understand what the objective is. So make sure right up front, you know what the objective of the meeting is with the retailer. And then, of course, this is common sense, but make sure that you customize your presentation to the retailer. Like we talked about at Whole Foods, understand what their hot buttons are. What are their key points, key objectives. What are they looking for? Bruce and I have talked about in other episodes, get into some stores, know what that category section looks like, and get maybe even include some pictures into your presentation so that you know that you're communicating to that retailer that you understand them, their objectives, and what their stores look like. And then the thing that we've talked about before, don't come in with a 40-page deck. Keep it clear and concise. That's really important. And make sure that it's a conversation. Don't just go through the presentation and get to the end. Allow the buyer to ask questions. Make sure that it's an interactive experience for both you and the buyer. So I think those were really some key points from Heather.
Yeah, so there's a few more here, but before we move on, just to hit on something Tracy said, Casey from Whole Foods was using an example here earlier, and she said, it's amazing when people are in such a hurry they don't proofread. She said one thing that always irritates us is when we get a presentation that somewhere in the presentation there's a different retailer's name. I mean, folks, how sloppy is that? Slow down, proofread. I mean, that just says that you're not important to me. I can't even proofread to make sure that I'm not sending something from Whole Foods to Publix. Come on. Okay, so there were a few other things here in Heather's point. Understand the audience and what's important to them. So Tracy and I talk about, studying each individual retailer has strategies and objectives. Each buyer has strategies and objectives and what they're trying to accomplish in order to, quite honestly, get a good review, get a good raise, and get a good bonus, right? So if you know how they are graded and evaluated, tailor your presentation. If they need to, drive their organic product mix, do it. If you know that they're trying to get more people onto their digital ad platform, see if you can help and make a small investment there. Express your story visually. There is absolutely nothing more painful than an 80-page deck full of numbers. Absolutely nothing. And a lot of times you're trying to stand out on the shelf. So show your packaging, show some happy people buying your product, show a couple of charts that show that there's a demand for your product. I don't care if your appendix is 800 pages long, put all your numbers in there. But when you have 30 minutes to talk to a buyer, you want to have a conversation, not a lecture, and you should have about 15 pages, right? And you should be asking them questions early, because if they're playing on their phone, looking at their shoes, hoping someone knocks on the door and tells them there's an emergency, you've already lost. Tracy already said, keep it concise, and then follow up quickly and accurately. One of the things that we talk about is within 2 business days. If a buyer asks you a question that you don't know, and that's okay, you can't know everything. Tell them you don't know, but you'll get back to them in X period of time. Note to file, it better not be more than 2 business days. Okay, they're not asking if your product is available on the space station. They're probably asking you, have you considered a different case pack or something that you can answer? So those are some of the things. But Heather did a great job. And she was very vocal that if people are interested in learning more about how they help clients to reach out to her. Okay.
Bruce, before we get on from Heather,
I'm sorry, Trace, go.
one thing that just popped in my mind that Heather talked about, practice your presentation. Be able to know it cold, because you may get into a meeting where you have 30 minutes and the buyer is running behind and you only have 15. You better know your presentation cold, know how to go through those pages and really just communicate the highlights. I thought that was a really good point because that happens a lot.
Yeah, that is a good point. And a little, not trick, but a little tactic I've always used for most of my career is when you meet with a retailer, or almost when you meet with anyone, the first thing I like to do is confirm our time. Because like Tracy said, unless you're the first person of the day, they may already be late. They may have had some emergency meeting called. So you start your meeting, say, hey, Tracy, we still have 30 minutes. Actually, Bruce, I only have 20. Okay, so you've confirmed that up front versus they just start walking to the door 10 minutes early. Okay, so be on the ball. And if they tell you that they have time, that they have less time, you got to know what you can cut. Now, the other thing that's good there is most buyers know that you kind of got pimped a little bit. So you can follow up and say, hey, I know we got cut a little short. I'm going to follow up with an email and I might try to get a call. But those are all just ways to make progress. And then the last topic was marketing transformation, how a full funnel approach unlocks growth. And Cheryl Policastro, the VP of Strategic Marketing and Communication from MPG, delivered this. Now, she had a bad spot in the batting order. Her stuff was really good, but she was the last speaker of the day. So she kind of felt the pressure we all do when we draw that spot in the batting order. But she had a couple of really great points. So, in order to utilize and capitalize on the way consumers are thinking and working and shopping now, she said you have to deploy a full funnel approach. You can't just think you're going to win in the last 3 feet at the shelf. How do you get into that? How do you drive some awareness and then drive that consideration, which then leads to the purchase? And then if the product performs, you're into the beloved repurchase cycle, and you might be on your way toward becoming brand used most often, which is what we all want. But you have to rethink brand engagement. Like Tracy said right up front with Oliver, a couple of years ago, no one knew what social commerce was. No one knew what TikTok was except, junior high girls and elementary school people doing dance videos. Now they're doing $20 billion.
Yeah.
Instagram, click here now and you can buy. It's not, here's my ad. Now you have to go to Kroger or over to Amazon. So you have to be rethinking how you're engaging with these consumers. And then you have to navigate the new retailer realities. Okay. So we did a couple of shows on retailer media networks. Why is that a new retailer reality? Because it's important to them. It's important to them because these retailers got tired of seeing Amazon's ad platform growing 70% a year with 70% margins. And they said, I want some of that. Okay. So you got to do some math and figure out, can you do a test with these people? It may or may not work for you depending upon your brand, but that's just one example of a new retailer reality. Okay. And you got to nurture these stakeholder relationships. And that's all the way through what I'll call the value chain. So you have to value your consumer, know what they want. You have to keep your contract manufacturers happy, got to keep your employees happy, got to keep your buyers happy. Here's one you might forget. You need to keep the replenishment people in your retail partners happy. If you're having shipping problems or damages showing up all the time, eventually you'll hear about that, but those are things you just have to try to avoid. And then she talked about how big ideas fuel the content machine. And if you think about this as a flywheel, she drew a really interesting schematic on the board. Product detail pages, educate the consumer on your product and how it works. You may have videos, etc. That helps drive reviews from people who have tried your product. That can drive social content because people will tell their friends, or you might be hiring influencers or doing testimonials about your product. And if those are good enough, that starts to influence your ad content, because if everyone's talking about how this, helps my sore feet feel better, that should probably become part of your messaging, which then leads back into how you construct your product detail pages, and it works. But these components need to really work together to drive maximum efficiency and positive impact for your brand. Tracy?
Yeah. So one of the other things that was discussed was the enhanced shopping experience. So obviously, brick and mortar is under attack from e-commerce and Amazon and TikTok. So really, enhanced shopping is all about discovery and education, trying to educate and make that your product available, in store. Make sure that you're communicating your clear value proposition. And that's where really your packaging comes in. And then also then make sure that your communication is relevant, knowing what your consumer is looking for. And a lot of this can be done, through social media and and building a community of people that are, fans of your brand through social media. So those were a couple of the things that was talked about with it as far as enhanced shopping.
Yeah, so just a couple of things before we roll into Tracy's world famous big finish for each episode of The Road to Retail. Tracy and I want to thank ECRM
Yeah.
for inviting us to come to the show. The Innovate X winning in grocery content was super interesting. Want to thank Todd Matherly and his team at Market Performance Group for the work they did, and then Wayne and his team for, like usual, doing another excellent ECRM show. And this one was called the Center Store Grocery Week Program. For those of you brands that are looking for traction and trying to figure out how to get the word out faster, you should really reach out to Wayne Bennett and the ECRM team, because they have all kinds of different shows, but the only thing that's consistent across all of them is they help brands win. Okay. They help brands win. So depending what your need is, contact them and they might be able to help you out. And then lastly, as I said up front, we have another new sponsor coming to the show that you'll be hearing more about in future episodes, but just want to take a second to talk about Retail and Response. They're an audio advertising agency specializing in national and regional campaigns that can dramatically drive sales across digital and brick and mortar channels. And before you think, geez, Bruce, I'm miles away from doing any traditional media, Buck Robinson and his team at Retail and Response can make your dollars work harder than you've probably ever thought. And you can reach out to them at retailandresponse.com. But we'll have more on this group in future episodes, but welcome aboard. All right, Tracy, if you have nothing else to add, bring it home, baby.
This was great, Bruce. It was a great show to attend. Little chilly in Chicago, but again, shout out to our friends at ECRM for all of the support. And thank you, audience, for joining us today. We really enjoyed it. Hope you found our episode helpful, and look for our episodes that we post every Tuesday. And also, please continue to follow us on Road to Retail on Spotify, Apple, and also on our LinkedIn page. Thanks for joining us today.
Good luck out there, folks.